Ladies and gentlemen, the days of the NBA Eastern Conference is over, man. I'm just so satisfied and pleased with the parity of the NBA. Everything just seems all things balanced, all things as they should be. We don't have one team just completely running everyone else out the gym. We have a few tanking teams, but they're at least trying and they at least have some good things going for them. But I was thinking about this and I was thinking about the East versus West, and I'm like, yo, hang on a second. Is the East actually better than the West right now? So I know no team in the NBA is a guaranteed W technically, but there are legitimately 13 out of 15 teams in the East who can beat anybody on any given night. The only teams in the East that are giving out free lunch consistently every night are the Pistons and the Magic. But in the West, however, I think you have at least 3 teams that most teams should have no problem beating, and that's the Thunder, the Pelicans, and the Rockets. And shout out to the Timberwolves for actually not being on that list for once. So has the East actually passed the West? I think they've at least caught up to them, but have they passed them? I think we can answer this question in about 3 parts. 1, the number of contenders. Who are the actual teams with a real chance of competing for an NBA title this season? 2, we look at the star power. We look at how all the NBA's best players are distributed among the 2 conferences. And then 3, we can look at the road to the finals itself. Are we getting more of those LeBron cakewalks like we used to see when he was in Cleveland, or is it more of a dogfight? First, looking at the number of contenders. So as of today, it's December 13th, 2021. There are legitimately 2 contenders in each conference. No more, no less. It's out of the West, it's the Warriors and the Suns, and out of the East, it's the Bucks and the Nets. Who's better between the East and the West between those? It's tough to say. I mean, the Warriors and the Suns have a better record than the Bucks and the Nets, but keep in mind the Bucks were missing like 4 out of their 5 starters for much of the season leading up until now, and the Nets are still obviously without Kyrie Irving. So I'll call these like the S tier contenders, but there are a bunch of kind of A and B tier teams that they're kind of dark horses to win the title, is a better way of saying it. And I think when you look at some of these dark horses, I think the advantage actually leans in favor of the East. So number 1, the Bulls. They were the number 1 team in the East until their entire roster got COVID. They have 10 players in the health and safety protocols. That's just ridiculous. And they're still the number 2 seed right now. Their team is pretty built well for the playoffs. I mean, they have good star power. They have shot creation. I think they're built pretty well for the playoffs. Second team in the East is the Miami Heat as a dark horse. Because, I mean, they were just in the finals 2 years ago. They have it all. They got veteran leadership, coaching, culture, playoff experience. Jimmy Butler. I just think, I mean, ever since the Heat acquired Kyle Lowry in the offseason, they've been my dark horse to win the whole thing. And then the third one, don't hate me for this, it's the 76ers. I know, I'm a delusional Sixers fan, but I'm not that delusional. So I know, as presently constructed, we are not winning anything. We might be a first round exit as currently constructed. If we were actually to get someone who complements Joel Embiid's play style before the trade deadline, I think that puts us right at least in the middle of A tier, maybe even as an S tier contender in the East. Now we go out West. Who are some of those dark horse teams that I didn't mention outside of the Suns and Warriors? Do I have to say the Lakers? How long are we going to keep giving them the benefit of the doubt? Man, they suck. They're not a good team. They have LeBron James. I don't trust AD and Westbrook to carry that team. The only reason I'll count the Lakers as like a fringe contender is because they have LeBron James. And I've counted them out before, and I won't make that same mistake again. Another team out of the West is the Utah Jazz. So the Utah Jazz, they actually remind me a lot of the Bucks, actually, kind of before they made that leap into NBA champions. Because, I mean, they have a defensive player of the year caliber big man. They have an all-star level perimeter bucket getter, good coaching. Both teams get up a ton of threes. Right now, they're actually currently number 1 and number 2 best teams regarding three-pointers made in the whole league. And before the Bucks made their title run, I kind of thought that they would always be stuck as kind of this very good regular season team whose ceiling is nothing more than the Eastern Conference Finals. But hey, they saw a window of opportunity to take that leap. They got a little fortunate in some areas, but hey, props to them for taking advantage of it. And who knows with the Jazz? Maybe they can get a couple favorable matchups. Knock on wood, a couple injuries might happen, and maybe the Jazz can pull it off too. The only problem is the Jazz do not have a Giannis, and that's why they're a dark horse contender and not an actual contender, in my opinion. So the winner of assessment number 1 goes slightly in favor of the East. Now looking at the level of star power, so I think a good way of evaluating the level of star power between the 2 conferences is to literally paint an all-star game picture. So let's make some predictions on the fly here. I'm going to take my best shot at making an all-star game picture, and then I'm just going to compare these players 1-to-1. Don't kill me for this, man. I'm trying my best. So I have the Eastern starters versus the Western starters here, and then I also compare the Eastern reserves against the Western reserves. And again, this is all my opinion. If I were to make a prediction on who's in the All-Star game right now, this is the list I would come up with. So Trey Young versus Steph Curry, I'm rocking with Steph, obviously. James Harden and Luka Doncic, that is a tough one, man. He could go either way, but I'm personally leaning closer towards James Harden in this one. Kevin Durant or LeBron James. Kevin Durant is the best player in the league right now. Giannis or AD. I'm going with Giannis. Embiid or Jokic. I'm not going to be biased, man. I'm going to go with the reigning MVP. I show my respect to Nikola Jokic right here. Now, if you move on to the reserves, LaMelo Ball or Chris Paul, I'm rocking with CP3 on that. DeRozan and Dame is actually probably closer than most of us will probably admit. I mean, DeRozan is top 10 in MVP voting right now, but who are we kidding, man? Damian Lillard is still the better player here. Jimmy Butler or Devin Booker? Man, I could swing either way on this one. I'm gonna go with Jimmy Butler ever so slightly. Jason Tatum or Paul George? I think I'll give the slight advantage because of his overall efficiency, and I think a slight edge on defense. I'm gonna give it to Paul George on this one. Bam or Rudy Gobert? I'm gonna rock with Gobert on this one. Zach LaVine or Ja Morant? Rocking with Ja. Bradley Beal or Donovan Mitchell is very close, but I'm rocking with Donovan Mitchell on that one. So there we see like the Eastern versus the Western starters might favor the East ever so slightly, but when you look at the reserves, it favors the West. So how do we kind of split this difference? The snubs. Who was left off of my list? Which conference had more snubs than the other one? So in the West, I think about guys like SGA, it's a big name. DeJounte Murray is almost averaging a triple-double. And he's on the Spurs, who aren't doing so great right now, but he's been a star, man. And he's one of the candidates for most improved player of the year. And then Karl Anthony Towns is always should always be in consideration for an all-star spot. The reason why he hasn't got it is just because the Timberwolves are usually terrible. But right now, they're actually in the play-in tournament picture right now. So you might have to give that dude some love. And then out of the East, I was struggling with finding snub because my list is so perfect, first of all, but I mean, who would y'all count as a snub in the East? I mean, someone from the Cavs probably, Jarrett Allen or Darius Garland probably. I mean, they're the best players on that team. I guess I'll give the edge to Jarrett Allen as a snub. Jaylen Brown from the Celtics. I mean, the Celtics don't deserve 2 All-Stars. Take your pick between JT or JB. They can't have both. Domantas Sabonis is obviously the best player on the Pacers right now. They're not, Julius Randle was an All-Star last year, but he hasn't really been playing up to All-Star caliber this year. Chris Middleton has missed a lot of time, and I don't think he's really played up to that All-Star caliber level that we know he's capable of. And after that, who am I missing? I swear I must be missing someone huge, but I can't think of them. So I think there are more snubs out of the West than there are in the East. And so I'll give the star caliber talent assessment to the West. Now for the last and probably the most important test, I'm gonna look at the road to the NBA Finals. So there's a few different ways you could look at this. Obviously, we're gonna have to do a little bit of projecting of the playoff picture for these purposes. But for this, I'm just gonna compare the path of the 2 number 1 seeds, which right now is the Suns and the Nets. So as it currently stands, the Suns would have to play the Denver Nuggets. I'm gonna ignore the play-in tournament and just assume 1 versus 8 right now. So the Suns are playing the Denver Nuggets in the first round. And that's not easy. I mean, they don't have Jamal Murray, they don't have Michael Porter Jr. for the rest of the year, but they still have to deal with Jokic. I think the Suns will probably win that in 5, maybe 6 games. Then the Suns will have to play the winner of the Clippers and the Grizzlies. That's interesting because, one, I don't know who would win that matchup between the Grizzlies and the Clippers because, I mean, it all depends on if Kawhi comes back. If Kawhi comes back and he's healthy for that matchup against the Suns, might be end of the road there, Phoenix. I don't know. And then the Suns would have to play the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. I got Warriors in 6 in that one, especially with Klay Thompson coming back. Now for the number 1 seed in the East, the Nets, they would have to play the Hornets in the first round. That is must-see TV. We're not going to see a lick of defense. These teams are going to average 140 points each. They're just going to be up and down the court. Man, I'm actually hoping for that matchup because that'll be super exciting. I need to see that. Then in the second round, the Nets will have to play the winner of Miami or Cleveland. Cleveland is a very good team. Cannot sleep on them. They're not the pushovers that they used to be, but I still think the Heat will probably win that matchup in 5 or 6 games, probably 6. So now you have the Nets versus the Heat. I mean, that's a huge change of pace, especially coming from that Hornets series. And that's going to be tough, man. The Heat, like I said, they're my dark horse to win the whole thing anyway. So, I mean, that's going to be a dogfight. I can see that going to 7 games. And then the Nets would have to play the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, I don't want to go there, but Kevin Durant almost did that by himself. He was a toenail away from beating the Bucks already, and James Harden was playing on one leg. They didn't have Kyrie back. I think the Nets are very capable of beating the Bucks, especially since the Bucks don't really have anything left to prove. I mean, maybe they still have that hunger. We'll have to see when it comes playoff time. I really don't know who has the harder path in that sense. I mean, on one hand, I would much rather play the Bucks than the Warriors in the conference finals. But at the same time, it's kind of cakewalkish to have to face up the Nuggets, who are missing 2 of their 3 best players, and then meet up with a Clippers team that might not even have their best player. It's tough, man. My point is, the East is back. And on that note, that's all I have for you all, man. If you're still watching, I appreciate you sticking around. Let me know in the comments down below which conference you think is better between the East and the West. I think if I had to make a decision, I would still go with the West by a hair, just because of the upper echelon talent that is the Phoenix Suns and especially the Golden State Warriors. And of course, a lot of this stuff is subject to change. You know, we did a lot of assumptions, a lot of hypotheticals, but hypotheticals are fun, man. And that's what I hope to do on this channel, is have some fun. And who knows, maybe I'll actually be right about it. I'll see y'all in the next one.